Now, for this section, I prepared a brand new basic Next.js project, and you find it attached. Once you downloaded it, you'll just need to run npm install once to install all dependencies. And then you can start the development server with npm run dev. And you'll then get a very simple application that allows you to view posts, if there were any. We'll add some soon, and which most importantly therefore also allows you to add new posts. And that's precisely what we'll work on throughout this section, because of course it's that adding posts part that involves the creation of new data and therefore the mutation of data, and that's exactly the main topic of this section. So we got a form in this starting application I provided to you. And the goal, of course, is to make sure that when this form is submitted with help of that create post button, that we save the data that has been entered here, that we store the uploaded image somewhere, and that we store the title and the content somewhere, for example, in a database. And indeed, in this starting project I prepared for you, you'll find a lib folder, and in there you'll find a posts.js folder, which does indeed include code to store a new post in a database. And this file actually also contains much more code than that. It also includes all the code for setting up that database. And that code will run every time you start this application, making sure that all the necessary tables are created if they don't exist already. And as you see here, we have a users table, we have a posts table, and we have a likes table. And I'm using a SQLite database here to store all that table data. And I also got some code here to set up 2 dummy users, which we'll use throughout this section. You will learn how to add authentication and user management later in this course. For now, we'll work with these dummy users here. So that's what we got in there. And then, as mentioned, we got this store post function, which in the end, of course, should be triggered whenever this form here is submitted. And that, of course, means that we need to find out how we can handle the submission of this form. And for that, we got various options. One option would be to set up a standalone separated backend API that accepts requests that contain that form data and that then stores the submitted data in some database. Kind of similar to what I showed you in the data fetching section, where we also started with an external API. But for the same reasons we didn't use that external API in that data fetching section. The reason was in the end that we own the data source, and therefore it doesn't really make sense to set up such an extra API. For that reason, I won't use that external API approach here, because why would we create a separate backend API and a separate project if we can actually integrate the logic for accepting form submissions and storing data in some database directly into our Next.js application? And as it will turn out, we can indeed manage all that directly in this Next.js application. And that's therefore the approach I'll use here in this section, because this is a Next.js course, and being able to handle data submissions is a core Next.js feature. Now, what we could do as an alternative would be to add some route handlers here in our project. We could, for example, in the app folder, add an API folder, and then there add a posts folder, or whatever you want to name it, and then in there add a file named route.js. I taught you about these route handlers earlier in the course already. In there, we could export a function called post, and with that, we would be able to send and handle post requests to /API/posts. And then we could put all the logic for extracting the request body, because we would receive the request as our argument, automatically, and all the logic for storing that extracted data into this function here, into this route handler. We could do that, and that might be a valid approach if we also have other clients submitting data, a mobile app, for example, that also needs to send data entered by a user. But if we're just building this one Next.js application, this also isn't really something we have to do. Sure, we could set up those extra routes and then send data to those routes from the client side, but Next.js actually offers us a better way of handling data submissions and data mutations. And that would be server actions.